Hello, welcome to Pankirian Channel. So, this title of this video is The Neo Enlightenment, and I wanted to create a channel, a podcast, I guess, just talking about how I feel and my growing discontent with a lot of conservative viewpoints out there. So, this is the Neo Enlightenment idea, at least. This is alt-right. This is beyond alt-right. This is alt-right. This is what alt-right considers too far gone. Okay? So, the inspiration for this is all these conservative pundits out there are almost all university anti-enlightenment, or the disenlightenment, right? The counter-enlightenment. The Enlightenment principles are paramount to conservatism. Republicanism is paramount to conservatism, but they are different, and conservatism, in the modern definition at least, has gone too far left for me, too far socialist for me. So this is going to be a purely pro-Enlightenment, conservative, Republican, whatever you want to call it, individualist take to things. So I have with me here two documents I've read and I just reviewed real quick before I started this. The Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, and Common Sense by Thomas Paine. So these two documents obviously are extremely important to the Enlightenment. Both of them outline very basic principles of common sense. Common sense. Such things as people are individuals and cannot be divided by groups, even in the Republican sense of division by land, which is, in my opinion, the most effective way to divide a government, does not define an individual. In fact, an individual cannot be defined by its very definition. An individual is an individual, right? The Enlightenment saw a lot of scientific advancement. A lot of the Enlightenment principles were born off the back of scientific advancement. But science only goes so far, right? The Enlightenment is kind of against science as well, right? Because there's no way to prove liberty scientifically. There's no way, there is if you just set a bunch of arbitrary axioms, but I mean like 2 + 2 = 4 level of proof. There's no proof for liberty. There's no scientific proof for anything like that, or freedom, or pretty much anything. And the concept of science itself has seen a lot of problems, of course, in modern day as well. We've kind of hit the limit as far as the concept of science can go. So I'm not very pro-science, and neither is the Enlightenment, I'd contend. Various concepts like natural law and things like that are obviously not in line with Enlightenment principles. So basically, I've noticed in my very short time here on this planet, that a lot of ideologies, a lot of politics, a lot of things in general, a lot of the way people eat, the way people dress themselves, the way people think, what they do, their actions, can basically all be boiled down into two types. And I hesitate to call them types because again, being pro-Enlightenment, being anti-socialist, you can hardly agree with Jungian ideals of archetypes and all these complete pseudoscience things that have become modern science now. But that is the only way I know how to describe it. So everyone is basically either pro-individualist or pro-socialist, anti-individualist, whatever you could call it. Anything you could call it. Everyone is pro, curtains, and everyone is pro as an anti-curtains, open windows. Doesn't matter, whatever it is, call it whatever you like. The point is, either you believe that everyone exists on an individual level, or you believe they can be divided into groups, right? Thomas Paine talks about this. He talks about how the concept of a society is not necessarily divisive. Now, I would argue that it is, but naturally it becomes that way. But regardless, the concept of a society government is divisive, according to Thomas Paine. But that's besides the point. Most people don't have a truly individualistic view. They have a very socialistic view. At least a lot of people, not a lot of people that I've spoken to on the streets, but a lot of people, a lot of the politicians, the people who claim to speak for us, right? And regardless, it could be anything. It's boogeyman. It's always a boogeyman with the socialists, right? It's always a boogeyman. It's race, it's gender, it's their IQ, it's the country of origin. It's something. It's some boogeyman that exists in the sky. It's something you can't touch with your bare hands. It's something you can't see with your own eyes, right? It's something that you have to basically intrinsically deny what your own brain is telling you and think this way. And that's what I've had a lot of problems with modern politics. They're not even modern politics. Again, that's an anti-enlightenment thing to say. This is the state of the world, right? I mean, Proudhon argues that it goes back to Plato and all them, that this is sort of the status quo. There's always been this camp that believes in, yeah, I can probably do that, or authority must do it for me. That's a great topic, in fact. Let's talk about authority. Authority doesn't exist, right? When have you ever trusted? You've probably trusted authorities. Have authorities been right 100% of the time? Who gives them authority? Right? There's no tangible authority in the world between people. The only authority is the gods. That's the only authority. Again, this is Samuel. This is Thomas Paine. This is as old as the Bible. This is everything. This is common sense. No one can know something better than you, regardless of whatever it is. Medicine, quantum mechanics, math, piano, walking, eating, drinking, sleeping, breathing. No one can know something, anything, better than you can, the individual. Authority doesn't exist. Please try and go get yourself some authority. Go down to your local supermarket and buy yourself some authority, right? Doesn't exist. That's a very materialistic thing to say, but that's kind of my point. I am not a materialistic person. I'm very anti-material things. I'm very pro-abstract concepts and things like that. Authority is what would destroy all those things, right? Because how could I possibly think abstractly? Well, someone else has better authority over me. Someone else has this greater authority. These scientists that supposedly know everything about nutrition, about atomic structure, about electrical engineering, and about the principles. I'm very well skilled. I have a degree in electronics engineering, and they supposedly know more. but they don't even know some basic manipulations of electromagnetic principles that are used in everyday tools, like shaded pole motors, right? Like they're completely ignorant of basic things. This authority doesn't exist. Authority is perceived, right? There are no lords before me. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but that's the principle, right? That's the gist. There are no lords before me, before God. There is no authority before God. And of course, if you subscribe to Christianity, as do I, you must also believe, or even any religion, but Christianity is a good example, that the Lord does not live in churches, right? That no man, there can be no arbiter between man and Jesus. There's nothing in between. Jesus is omnipresent. God is omnipresent, right? He's forever. He's in all things, permeates all things. Everything has God. There is no arbiter. There is no in between, and certainly there is not man in between you and the Lord, right? And this is showcased even in Judaism, which is very heavily, pro temple, as is the teachings of Moses. Even in Judaism, did who was it? Ephraim, was it Ephraim's sons who were killed outside the temple? Right? It was someone like that. They were killed outside the temple. God exacts smite upon people outside of the temple. He performs miracles outside of the temple. Does all these things outside of your materialist, authority, your materialist random place on a random globe somewhere, a random rock floating through space. He exists everywhere, regardless of whatever, authority exists out there. God is the ultimate authority. The individual is it. That's the ultimate authority. Like, trust no one, right? Trustless based system. This is all ties in. That's my next point, actually. This all ties into concepts such as free and open source software, cryptocurrency, federalism in general, a trustless based system, transparency, glasnost, a trustless based system where I should not have to trust anyone. I should not have to rely on anyone to live. I shouldn't have to trust anyone to live or to do anything or to etc., etc., etc. Right? Except maybe a spouse. A spouse. I don't know if you should intrinsically trust your family. You should probably be loyal to your family. That's just me. You know, like that level, right? Like trustless based system. That's the way the world should operate. That's very in line with the Enlightenment. That's kind of the whole idea of a constitution. That if I see, someone doing something I don't like, it's like, okay, well, what can I do about it? What are the agreed upon laws? They're written down in a common language that we can all understand and read at any time, available to us at any time, right? The president does something horrible or something like that, he answers to this. This is the supreme law of the land. The president, the House of Representatives, and the judicial branch, executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, all answer to this. There's nothing higher than this. This is the penultimate, right? This is above the president. This is above all those branches, above everything. It is the Constitution. It is a trustless based system. It's open and transparent. That's kind of the idea. Anyway, so all these sort of concepts are very Enlightenment. If you subscribe to basically any any principle of obviously federalism, right? Federalism, born out of the Enlightenment, Montesquieu, and all that. All any kind of principle like that, you have to be pro Enlightenment. But a lot of people aren't. A lot of these conservative pundits are not pro Enlightenment. So this is the Neo Enlightenment. This is the alt right. This is beyond everything. This is beyond whatever. Put X boogeyman here for the socialists out there, right? Like I'm not gonna. There's also a lot of political lies, of course, out there. There's a lot of I don't know if they're lies or misinformation. What's misinformation? There's no misinformation, but there's a lot of stuff that's kind of fascism is not a right-wing idea at all, right? Fascism was born by a socialist, very very you know, righteous socialist named Mussolini, Benito, and he was a socialist all his life, and he thought the socialists didn't go far enough, so he made his own socialist party, Fascismo, and started all that stuff. Only it was just socialism for Italians, or whatever he considered deserving, right? Whoever he considered deserving was who got the socialism. Everyone else was cast aside. Still socialism. Still a complete rule of government over the individual, rule of the group over the individual. The definition of socialism. So that's the principle of socialism is, you know, rule of many over one. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And the principles of republicanism and the principles of federalism, enlightenment, freedom, the principles of free and open source software, the principles of cryptocurrency, the principles of the Roman Republic, right? That's another thing that gets me. All those principles are obviously the needs of the individual over the needs of society. That's the way it should be anyway. It should always be the needs of the individual over the needs of society. But the Roman Republic is a good example. A lot of the conservatives as well go out and try and talk about traditionalism. You hear about that. You'll hear about that word, tradition. Well, tradition is, first of all, their tradition ends in the mid 1800s. All their traditions. Okay? All their traditions were invented in the mid 1800s, and they all end in the mid 1800s. A lot of the traditional so-called, church practices, a lot of the traditional mores, social mores that we have in terms of dating and courting and marriage and everything else, and a lot of their views on more controversial topics like sex or something else, right? All of those all their views start in the Victorian era. Before the year, 1800, before 1815, before Napoleon, even during Napoleon's time, the Napoleonic Wars, 1815, there were brothels everywhere. There were brothels everywhere into the 1800s, but there were brothels on this earth since at least written language, since at least 3000 BC. Right? There were brothels everywhere. That was normal. Sex is normal. Okay? Now sex before marriage, of course, you shouldn't, I don't know if I'm against sex before marriage really, but it's ideal, whatever. But that's a normal that's tradition. Brothels are tradition, right? Much more traditional than the concept of no sex before marriage, which only began about 200 years ago. The priests and everything were preaching it before then. It's not a tradition. It wasn't a socially accepted thing. Very rare, right? So, yeah, that's kind of the whole problem. They're all hypocritical. All the socialists, I'm just going to call them socialists. I mean, all the conservative pundits, all of them are very hypocritical, extremely hypocritical. Uh, I believe, in freedom, but I'm going to put a bunch of arbitrary restrictions on freedom. Brings me to another great point. The Enlightenment is very anti-arbitrary. It's very anti-arbitrary things, very against arbitrary restrictions like who decides what, right? Who decides what is wrong, what is right, what is misinformation? Well, ultimately, the only decider is God. That's it. Begin all and end all. The judge of all things are the gods themselves, Jesus. All of them, right? Vishnu, Zeus. In the Hellenic case, it'd be King Minos and the Western dead and whatever else. All these, who is the judge? It is ultimately the Lord. It is for the individual to decide what is right and what is wrong, not for some authority to restrict people from doing things or tell people not to do things. In a society that doesn't allow murder, which unfortunately we don't live in, but we'll get to that in another video. But in a society that doesn't allow murder, that only allows killing in self-defense, which would be, in my opinion, the ideal society, is the only society that allows killing in self-defense. You know, in a society like that, there's going to be criminals. All right, there's criminals. Let's say Second Amendment. Let's say everyone has guns. All right, everyone has guns. Okay, well, first thing that a socialist would say, just get rid of all the guns, give them to the cops. Right? They have the authority. The authority is benevolent. There's no questioning the authority. There's nothing. Give all the guns to the authority, take them away from the people. Well, you'd figure that'd be, oh wow, that's enforcement right there. Only the authority has the guns. Until they don't. And because the outlaws don't care if the authority has the guns, right? The outlaw doesn't care at all. So a law that was imposed made the state lawless. The outlaw doesn't care. The outlaw is going to be much better armed than the authority, no matter what. That is the presence of Satan. That is the presence of the devil. They will always be better prepared in the materialist sense. That is a rule. Right? So that creates a completely lawless state, a state with no guns. No guns. Only the outlaws have the guns. The police get corrupted. They become corrupt. They become busy. Police are always busy. They go around, they become the Gestapo. They become whoever they want. They go around, torture whoever they want, steal, bribe, whatever. But the authority's never wrong. Never forget that. Someone always knows better than you. What do you know? You don't know anything. You know? You weren't a police officer. You're not educated in this, that, and the other. You don't have this certification. You didn't come from this place at this time in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen. You, you didn't do that. You didn't do this. You have no authority. You can't question them. Big Brother's always watching. Right? Big Brother's never wrong. You dare question the party? Really? Oh, well. So, yes, obviously you need to have guns. And guns are very important. Guns are just tools. I know it's said over and over again. Firearm is a tool. People use tools. People kill people. You're going to outlaw guns. Might as well outlaw hands. Just cut off everyone's hands. No problem. Just no problems at all. No, and then they're going to use their feet. Oh, their teeth. Oh, God. Now they're butting heads with each other to kill each other. Oh, no. Got to get rid of them heads, man. It's just a never-ending never-ending cycle. It's just crazy. There's no limit. That's the point. All of it's arbitrary. Everything is arbitrary, right? Who decides what is right, what is wrong, what is a tool, what isn't a tool, what is a gun, what isn't a gun, right? Is a slingshot a gun? Is anything that explodes a gun? Are you going to outlaw, combustion engines? Are combustion engines guns, right? Whatever. Just never ends. It's a perpetual cycle of madness until there's nothing left. It's perfect order. Chaos is order in its perfect form. That is the principle of the Enlightenment. That is one of the major principles of the Enlightenment, anyway. So, yes, this is the Neo Enlightenment. This is the alt-right, 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 Google number of times, alt-right. I'm extremely, pro-individualism, anti-authority, just, I'm religious. I'm a pretty religious person. I don't personally believe in church, but I am very religious, and so I just wanted to point out these principles here, and I'm gonna just start doing this channel talking about whatever topics come to my mind and my thoughts and my opinions, and maybe someone out there will agree who's tired of all these socialist imposters in the so-called right. And I like Donald Trump is probably the least socialist of all the people in the MAGA movement, in the conservative movement, in all of politics, really. One of the least socialists, at least. But even Donald Trump has some things like that act that prevents people from defaming people using AI generated images. Like, well, no, AI is just a tool, right? The generated image, you know what the solution to that is, right? Stop posting your damn pictures on the internet. You don't want people to see you. You don't want people to take your photos from the internet and use them later. Don't have any photos on the internet, right? That's the way it works. That's the solution. You don't want your daughter, your little girl being abused or whatever online. Don't don't allow them out there on the internet. Obviously, be different if someone was walking around taking pictures of her, right? That's an actual offense. That's actually like, what are you doing? And I'm not even sure if that's really prosecutable, but it is weird. It's stalker, I guess, harassment. You can't just go around harassing people, you know. So, like, that's what they compare it to, right? That's what they compare it to as this is harassment. This is just online harass. There's no such thing as online harassment. The internet doesn't exist. Yeah, how do you? They're harassing me on Instagram. Delete your Instagram account. It doesn't. It doesn't. That's a choice. Someone harassing you in real life is not a choice. You don't get that choice, right? You have to go out and buy a weapon or something and prevent them from harassing you in the future. You don't get they get to come up to you. They get the choice to harass you. You don't get the choice to be harassed in real life, right? So, that's my kind of disillusionment with Donald Trump and a lot of the broader MAGA movement and everything like that. So, anyway, those are my thoughts and opinions. I'm gonna start uploading here. So, why not? The Neo Enlightenment. Welcome to the only Neo Enlightenment channel that I know of. I looked up Neo Enlightenment before this just to see if it was like associated with anything, and it is apparently associated with some alt-right groups as well. I guess I don't said something about JD Vance. I hate JD Vance. He's a rhino communist from Ohio. You know, I watched this movie. I don't have his book. I was gonna buy his book, but I watched a movie instead, and it was not good. Anyway, so yeah, that's the Neo Enlightenment. Welcome to the official Neo Enlightenment channel. Okay, for all your alt right needs. All right, I'm gonna get going here. So I'll see you in another video.